Hey guys, this is Will at Third and Long. Today we are going to be breaking down the Week 3 college football games. A lot of interesting games. This was a week that I'd say most college teams would actually probably want to completely forget actually happened. A lot of close games. There was an upset. Basically, nobody looked good this week. So it kind of started out, a couple teams started looking bad, and then by the end of the night, basically everybody looked bad. So it was just one of those weeks. But let's go ahead and get started breaking them down. The first game that we had was the Georgia Bulldogs beating the Gamecocks 24-14. Georgia at halftime was actually down 14-3, looked very sloppy, but they owned the second half. They outscored the Gamecocks 21-0 second half. They did win 24-14. Carson Beck had a decent game second half. Georgia did outgain the Gamecocks 458 yards to 309 yards, and Edwards looked pretty good at running back. So, sloppy game, very close game. The Gamecocks played pretty well first half. Georgia made the adjustments at halftime. Not a good win necessarily because the Gamecocks completely controlled the first half. So had the Gamecocks actually been a better team, they would have been able to put this game away. Georgia is still starting out on offense really slow every single week. They need to tighten up. They're relying on turnovers and adjustments at halftime. You can't do that every week. At some point, that's going to backfire. Thankfully for them, they have a cupcake schedule the whole year, so they might not actually have to pay for that till they get to the SEC championship or possibly even the playoffs. Next game we have was the Michigan Wolverines hosting Bowling Green. Michigan, the number 2 team, did win 31-6. This was a really sloppy game. So when you look at the stats for the game, J.J. McCarthy went 8 of 13. 13 passes, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks. He's usually very efficient, was not this game, and they were not throwing the ball. Blake Corum, 12 carries, 101 yards, 2 touchdowns. Donovan Edwards, 9 carries, 50 yards. Total stats for the game, we had Michigan, this was horrible, coming in 312 yards, Bowling Green 203 yards. So the Michigan defense did what the Michigan defense does, but the Wolverines offense looked awful. I don't know what was going on this game. Thankfully for Michigan fans, this was the last game without Harbaugh. So the idea is, once Harbaugh comes back next week, they should be back to normal. I am anticipating that they're going to start running the score up on teams because the guys coaching have just been keeping it safe, trying to make sure that no one gets hurt. Just run the clock out till Harbaugh gets back and then start playing Michigan football. But a really bad game from the entire offense outside of Blake Corum. They did not look good. I'm not worried, but not a very good game for them either at the number 2 spot. Had they had a really good game and looked dominant, they could have jumped Georgia, but Georgia didn't look good. Michigan didn't look good either. Next game we had coming up was the number 3 Florida State at Boston College. Georgia didn't look good. Michigan didn't look good. Florida State did not look good either. So had they performed really good, they could have jumped Michigan and Georgia, but they completely laid an egg. But they did get the win, and ultimately that's what matters. They won 31-29. Boston College had the game at the very end. They had 19 total penalties. Castellanos, 20 of 33, 305 yards, and he also ran 16 times, 95 yards. Jordan Travis did not, to me, have a good game statistically. A lot of opportunities for them to take the game over. They had a 31-10 lead, and they gave it up. They could not score a single point in the fourth quarter. When they needed to get a first down, they could not get a first down versus Boston College. That's very worrying. Total yardage, Florida State 340, Boston College 457. Completely pushed around by Boston College. Boston College wins this game if they don't have that many turnovers. Ultimately, all that matters is that you win. Florida State is just hoping that this was their worst game of the year. Every team, every season has a really bad game. Florida State is hoping this was theirs, and it's just a high road from this point going forward. They are going to be playing Clemson soon. Maybe they just got caught looking at Clemson. I'm not worried here because Florida State's been playing good the whole year. So maybe this was just a really bad week. But again, another team that did not play well. Next game, we had number 4 Texas hosting Wyoming. Texas wins 31-10. Here again, Texas did not look good. Quinn Ewers, 11 of 21, 130 yards, 2 touchdowns. Brooks, 21 carries, 164 yards. So they ran the ball well. Wyoming does have a pretty decent defense, but where was the offense from Texas? Kind of a letdown from the Alabama win. They strolled into this game and they basically did nothing. But maybe they were resting. Maybe they're just coasting. So again, I'm not worried. Texas, 316 yards and Wyoming, 291 yards. So again, they're not going to move up because just like the 3 teams in front of them, they did not play well at all, but they did get the win. Number 5, USC was sitting idle this week, so they didn't play, but they'll be playing next weekend. And at number 6, we had Ohio State hosting Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky does have a very good offense, so everyone kind of thought that this was going to be like a 50-24, 27 game. It was really close first quarter. People were starting to say, here we go again with Kyle McCord and Ryan Day, and the offense just looking like complete garbage. But then the second quarter came, 35 points in the second quarter. They completely took control of the game from the second quarter on from that point. They did win 63-10. That is right, 63-10. Ohio State used to score this many points every week when they played not so good teams. They haven't all season. They've been kind of looking like garbage. But the offense finally got clicking. So maybe this is a start of things going forward. Kyle McCord goes 19 of 23, 318 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. Trevion Henderson had a great game at running back, 13 carries, 88 yards. And Marvin Harrison Jr. did his thing, 5 receptions, 126 yards. So Ohio State is just hoping that this is basically going to gain them some momentum going into the Notre Dame game next week. Total yardage, 562 yards, and Western Kentucky had 284. This is a really good win because Western Kentucky has a pretty good offense. So the defense for the Buckeyes played great, and the offense finally got it going. Next game, we have Penn State playing Illinois. Now, Illinois has a pretty good defense, but Penn State did get the win 30-13. This game was kind of a slow game. It was kind of a slug-it-out game. Drew Aller, 16 of 33, 208 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. So with this game, this is another top 10 team that did not play well this week. So total yardage, 383 yards, and Illinois had 354 yards. But they did get the win, 30-13. That's ultimately what matters. But another letdown from a top 10 team. But I guess you can't bring it every week, but pretty much nobody brought it this week. Except for the Buckeyes for once so far this year. Now, here is one team that continued to be consistent. So, number 8, Washington playing Michigan State. Michigan State has a lot of issues going on with Mel Tucker right now. But Washington did get the win 41-7. Michael Penix, every single game, this guy's throwing for 450 yards. So he goes 27 of 35, 473 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. Again, throwing over 450 yards. This guy's crazy. And Michigan State, the game was somewhat close there for like the first minute and then a complete blowout. Washington, 713 total yards. Michigan State, 261. So Washington's defense has been playing pretty decent so far this year. Now, things are going to get a lot tougher once they get into conference play because the Pac-12 is loaded. But they've been holding up their own so far. But that offense, Penix Jr. looks like a beast so far this year. He is even better than he was last year, and last year he led college football in passing yards. Next game, we had number 9 Notre Dame hosting Central Michigan. So this game was close first quarter, and then Notre Dame pulled away and got the win 41-17. So Notre Dame has been the pinnacle of consistency so far this year. Defense looks great every single week. Offense is great and efficient every single week. Sam Hartman goes 16-26, 330 yards, 3 touchdowns, no picks. What about Estime? Every week this guy's running for 150 yards. So he has 20 carries, 176 yards, 1 touchdown. So a very well-balanced team. Total yardage, Notre Dame 578 yards and Central Michigan had 268 yards. Notre Dame is ready to play the Buckeyes, and the Buckeyes actually had a good offensive performance, so that's setting up for next week's game to be really good. Next game was a complete snooze fest, rounding out the top 10 here. Number 10, Alabama at USF. Bama wins 17-3. This game was awful. There was that really long lightning delay, but prior to that, it was an abomination, basically. So Bama, look, at halftime, 3-3. That's right, 3-3. Yes, Bama got the win. Alabama has a lot of issues right now. So they didn't want to start Milroe this week. They went with Tyler Buckner. He basically played like complete trash, but he was trash at Notre Dame. So he goes 5 of 14, 34 yards. And then they bring in Ty Simpson, the third string quarterback. He goes 5 of 9, 73 yards. I mean, not much better. Pretty much all 3 quarterbacks do not look good. So if you have 3 starting quarterbacks, then you have no quarterbacks. So Alabama has a lot of issues. But as I said, I predicted them to lose to Texas. And I thought that this would be a down year because a complete offensive change. And I did not think that Tommy Rees was a good coordinator. I just did not see it. Total yardage, Bama had 310 yards versus USF. And USF had 264 yards. A complete disaster there. If they play like this versus Ole Miss, and in the SEC games they have coming up, this team is in big trouble. They need to right the ship, and they need to right it soon. Next game, we had one of the lone upsets of the week. Number 11, Tennessee, traveling to the Swamp to play the Gators. The Gators did pull out the win, winning 29-16. Florida had 26 points at halftime, up 26-3, and then they only mustered a field goal second half. So they got really conservative, tried not to throw the ball second half, just run the clock out. Tennessee, they did start to move the ball second half. So Joe Milton III goes 20 of 34, 287 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Graham Mertz, a very conservative 19-24, 166 yards, 1 touchdown. But what about Trevor Etienne? 23 carries, 172 yards, 1 touchdown. So Florida wins the game on the ground. Tennessee lays the egg. But good for Florida, good for Billy Napier. They get the win 29-16. Next game, we had number 12, Utah hosting Weber State. Utah finally scores over 20 points, so good for them. They still don't have Cam Rising, but Johnson steps up big time at quarterback. He is now starting over Barnes. He goes 13 of 21, 193 yards passing, 1 touchdown, and he also leads the team in rushing, 16 carries, 71 yards, and 1 touchdown. So good for the Utes. Now, they didn't play a good team, so I wouldn't get too carried away here. But nonetheless, they've been really struggling to get first downs without Cam Rising. So they finally got at least that portion under control. They did only give up 127 yards. So dominant performance by the defense on offense. They get 424 yards. So hopefully this will kind of get things rolling there once they start getting into conference play soon. Next game we had coming up was the Oregon Ducks hosting Hawaii. So Oregon wins 55-10. They look good on both sides of the ball. Bo Nix goes 21 of 27, 247 yards, 3 touchdowns. Really good performance there. Good performance by the defense. Hawaii only had 201 yards. Oregon had 560 yards. So they continue to look like a dominant team. And like you said, Pac-12 is really loaded this year, and they are going to beat one another up big time. And this game was a complete bore fest. So number 14, LSU versus Mississippi State. I feel so bad for Mississippi State fans because you had Mike Leach. Things were looking great, and then he has since passed. Mississippi State does not look the same on offense. They completely retooled the offense. I thought that was not a very bright decision by Will Arnett because Will Rogers looks like complete trash. He's a lot better than that, but they are in a run-first scheme. They don't care. He's a great, talented quarterback. They will not let him play his style of offense. They are forcing him into this running style of play, and LSU put it on them, and Mississippi State could not get first down. So Jaden Daniels picked up right where he left off last week. 30 of 34, 361 yards, 2 touchdowns. Rushing, He again is the leading rusher. That's not sustainable. Someone else needs to step up as running back number 1. But he did have 15 carries, 64 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So he completely dominates throwing and running the ball. LSU had 530 yards total, and Mississippi State had 201 yards. Coming in at number 15, we had the next upset, and that was number 15, Kansas State, losing a really close one to Missouri. So at the very end of the game, Missouri got a 61-yard field goal to take the lead and get the win. Longest field goal ever in college football history. Will Howard did have a pretty decent game, but he was beat up during the game and couldn't run. So that could have cost Kansas State the game. But he went 25-39, 270 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. Brady Cook for Missouri, 23 of 35, 356 yards, 2 touchdowns. Really good performance there by Missouri, so congratulations to them. Kansas State, as we said, they were overrated, and they did give up this game. They had 408 total yards, and Missouri had 430. But congratulations to the Tigers. The game after that we had coming up was Oregon State at 16 hosting San Diego State. San Diego State has a pretty decent defense, but Oregon State came to play. They are having the best year that they've had in a really long time. So DJU went 14 of 30. Not very good there. He had 284 yards, 1 touchdown, 2 picks. And Damian Martinez, 15 carries, 102 yards. But they did play pretty good on defense. They had 475 total yards, and San Diego State, who's not very good, had 326 yards. But nonetheless, a good win for Oregon State, and hopefully they can keep things up. Pac-12 is really difficult this year, but hopefully they can still get to 9 to 10 wins again. Coming in at number 17, we had Ole Miss hosting Georgia Tech. So Ole Miss got the win here, 48-23. Ole Miss did not look good last week versus Tulane. They had Quinshon Judkins out this week, but they looked really good. So Jackson Dart goes 10 of 18, 251 yards, 1 touchdown. Jackson Dart was also the leading rusher, 14 carries, 136 yards, 2 touchdowns. So Lane Kiffin being the offensive guru, he is really had this team ready to play. They cannot wait to play Bama. So Ole Miss had 550 yards and Georgia Tech had 470 yards. But good game from Ole Miss as they win 48-23. The next game we had was number 18 Colorado hosting Colorado State. This game had a lot of buildup due to Colorado State's coach Norvell, the things he said about Deion Sanders, and this was a really tough game here. There's a lot of flags coming out. Everyone was all riled up. Colorado did get the win in overtime, 43-35. The game was not supposed to be that close. It was actually supposed to be a blowout for Colorado, but Colorado State came to play. Nonetheless, Colorado got to show their chops, and they got to come back from being down and get that win in overtime. So Shedeur Sanders, 38 of 47, 348 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 picks. Looking at the total team stats, Colorado State actually outgained Colorado. So they had 499 yards. Colorado had 418. Now, supposedly Travis Hunter is hurt and he might be out for a couple of weeks. So that's a pretty costly thing that happened. But congrats to Colorado on getting that win. After that, we're now looking at number 19, Oklahoma Sooners beating Tulsa 66-17. So Oklahoma continues to look very consistent so far this year. They're now 3-0. Dillon Gabriel, 28 of 31. He only had 3 completions out of 31 passes. 421 yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 pick. This team looked really good. They played great on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. Total yardage, Tulsa had 292 and Oklahoma had 595. After we have number 20, North Carolina Tar Heels versus the Minnesota Golden Gophers. So the Tar Heels do get the win, 31-13. This was one of their better performances. So Drake May goes 29 of 40, 414 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. Drake May, although he had 414 yards, has not looked comfortable in this Philip Lindsay offense. I think he definitely misses Phil Longo. Minnesota has a great defense, but a horrible offense. Nonetheless, Tar Heels get the win. They look good on both sides of the ball this week. Nate McCollum, 15 receptions, 165 yards. So maybe someone has finally stepped up as wide receiver number 1 for the Tar Heels. Total, they had 519 yards, and Minnesota had 303 yards. After that, we had number 21 Duke playing Northwestern. Northwestern still has a lot of issues going on. They are not good at all. Duke gets the win 38-14. Now, some of the things that I keep seeing. So, Riley Leonard, 15-20, very efficient, 219 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. But yet again, 13 carries, 97 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's all fine. But your quarterback should never be your leading rusher. At some point, the guy's going to get hurt. You can't throw it and run it and then all be done on the quarterback. Yes, that's fine for now, but Duke needs to find someone else. They need to spread out production. They cannot fully run and rely on Riley Leonard to do everything. But Duke did get 487 total yards, and Northwestern had 267. So Duke continues to win. Next game that we have coming up was the Thursday night game, and that was the Miami Hurricanes versus Bethune-Cookman. So Miami starters only played the first half. So they did get the win 48-17. Now that score doesn't give full justice to how much they beat the crap out of Bethune-Cookman. So Tyler Van Dyke only playing the first half, goes 19 of 23, 247 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. So he continues to look like a potential Heisman contender. Xavier Restrepo, 6 receptions, 120 yards, no touchdowns. He looks elite, only played the first half. Miami has 589 total yards, Bethune-Cookman 165. So Mario Cristobal continues to show that him changing coordinators was a good plan. He got rid of Kevin Steele, brought in Lance Guidry. He got rid of Josh Gaddis and brought in Shannon Dawson. They do get the win, and they continue to look really good so far this year. Next, number 23, Washington State hosting Northern Colorado. Washington State continues to put up big numbers. They did win 64-24. Ward, another good game. 20 of 26, 327 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks. So I feel so bad for Washington State and for Oregon State. They're having really good years, and they both have no home starting next year. Total yardage, Washington State 718. Northern Colorado, 366. So that's some video game numbers there. Next game, we had Chip Kelly's Bruins playing North Carolina Central. UCLA gets the win 59-7. Chip Kelly's team continues to look pretty good here. They are 3-0. Dante Moore, 8 of 12, 182 yards, 15.2 yards per completion. That's really good. 2 touchdowns. The Bruins look good. The Pac-12, like we said, top to bottom is loaded. Very deep conference. They had 614 total yards, and North Carolina Central had 232 yards. So another good win for the Bruins. Next game we had coming up was the number 25 Iowa Hawkeyes beating Western Michigan. I cannot believe it, 41-10. The Hawkeyes finally scored over 25 points. Probably won't happen again this year. So don't forget this picture, 41-10. They finally did it. Cade McNamara looked like garbage. 9 of 19, 103 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. But the whole Iowa Hawkeyes offense looks like garbage. So he just kind of fits in with everything else they have going on. They only mustered 387 yards, and Western Michigan 239 yards. So still, Kirk Ferentz needs to fire his son. Anyways, that's a complete breakdown of the top 25 from week 3, who won, who lost, and what happened. Hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks.